time for On Target Radio, Chicagoland's only radio show dedicated to educating, entertaining, and discussion of firearms, legislation, and your Second Amendment rights. Presented in part by the Illinois State Rifle Association, Illinois Gun Works, Pelcher's Shooting Supply, and Safer USA. Now here's your host, firearm instructor, educator, and enthusiastic Second Amendment proponent, David Lombardo.
Welcome to On Target Radio. I got off early on
false start.
That was a false start. What can I say? On Target Radio, America's voice for the Second Amendment. I'm David Lombardo, and my co-host Tim Dalan across the council. Say hi, Tim.
Hi, Tim.
It's never gone right before. Thank you. Every Sunday, Tim and I are here from 9 to 10 p.m. talking about all things Second Amendment. We won't be here next Sunday because it's the Illini basketball game, but we will be back the week after.
Does anybody listen to basketball? Why would somebody want to listen to basketball instead of listen to us?
I'm a graduate of the University of Illinois. Don't tread on the chief. Oh, wait, they killed him. Never mind. Okay. Anyway, it is your opportunity to call in and talk to our guest. Tonight, we have Eric Zorn, Chicago Tribune columnist, and we're going to be talking about the case for gun control and wherever the conversation goes. We will take your questions or comments at 312-642-5600 or go to Facebook, like our page on Target Radio, and ask a question there. But first, it is David's Rant of the Week.
Another good one, I'm sure.
I hope. This one is titled, What If Bob Just Wants to Be a Gardener? You have to give the Messiah credit where credit is due. Other presidents have suffered silently over having their hands tied by that nasty old out-of-date Constitution. Finally, we have a president who is smarter than those of us who live in flyover country. Small-minded paranoids who clutch their Bibles and their guns with such poor reading comprehension, they think the Constitution was written to protect their rights and limit the power of government. Intelligent guys understand it's nothing more than a living document designed by a bunch of rich old white guys that has to be put in context to be understood. The context apparently being that once you elect a Messiah, it's okay to use it as toilet paper. More to the point, it's okay to just issue executive orders for small inconsequential things such as assassinating American citizens. Personally, I think the Messiah must have been eating bad sushi to come up with a logic that concludes waterboarding a terrorist is wrong, but shooting an American citizen from the sky, no less, is okay. Now, admittedly, I can see how it meets the broad sense of the concept of due process. I mean, you know, the guy at Creech Air Force Base flying the unmanned drone over Afghanistan does have to get a thumbs up before shooting the American citizen 30,000 feet below. Don't get me wrong. I'm all for revoking the birth certificate of any terrorist, whether his name is Abdul or Bob. But am I the only one that thinks maybe Bob's U.S. passport might give him a bit of a leg up in the old, Bob, what the hell are you doing department prior to lighting him up? What if Bob is some dumb American in the wrong place at the wrong time and the 26-year-old kid eating a Twinkie at Creech Air Force Base is OD'd on sugar and misinterprets what he sees through a camera a quarter of the world away and 30,000 feet above Bob? Seriously. Shouldn't we have a chat with Bob before we liquefy him with a spent uranium round? What if Bob is there for reasons even Obama believes are acceptable? Stuff like, he's there to find work in the lawn care industry, or maybe just start a local chapter of the Latin Kings or Gangster Disciples. I mean, we'd let Bob sneak into the U.S. to do it and give him free benefits and health care to boot. Now, I know the White House is saying, we're only flying drones and doing this in Afghanistan, and then only to, and this is a quote, American citizens if they are believed to be senior operational leaders of al-Qaeda or an associated force, even if there is no intelligence indicating they are engaged in an active plot to attack the U.S. And I thought Obama and Eric Holder couldn't, in their wildest imaginations, come up with something more stupid than Operation Fast and Furious. It's good to know that I'm fallible. Now, I might have potentially been able to fall asleep at night thinking about this as long as I'd taken a shower to get the stink of it off of me, almost except for a couple of side notes. Why is the federal government putting in place the ability to fly unmanned drones over the U.S.? Then there are the 500,000 coffins that FEMA has purchased. That's going to require more than the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse to fill those babies. Then there's the small issue that over the past 10 months, the Department of Homeland Security has purchased 1.625 billion rounds of small arms ammunition, the largest order for ammo the federal government has ever made. Now, are you listening to this? 1,625,000,000 rounds of small arms ammo. U.S. soldiers used 5.5 million rounds of ammo a month in Iraq. If you do the math, DHS can wage a full-scale war for almost 30 years. And finally, my personal favorite, DHS Chief Napolitano has put out a request for a bid on 7,000 5.56 by 45 millimeter NATO personal defense weapons, also known as assault weapons when owned by civilians. Now, we know they're bad and not practical for personal defense, yet right in the request for a bid, DHS specifically refers to them as personal protection weapons for its agents. Oh, yeah. She also wants them to have 30-round mags. Lovely. Tell me again, Mr. President, how we gun nuts are paranoid. And here's the thought. Just because we're paranoid doesn't mean you're not really after us. And that, Tim, is my rant for the week.
That was another good one. That's 2 in a row.
Well, I try.
Yes, you do.
I give it my best. And now I will put away my red meat. And before we get to our guest, I just want to introduce Lauren Fuller. Lauren is in the NIU-J program, and he is here observing us, much to his chagrin at this point.
Drew the short straw, I guess.
It is indeed. Drew the short straw. But we do have on tonight Eric Zorn, the Chicago Tribune columnist. Eric, are you there?
I'm here, yeah.
Eric, say hi to Lauren. He wants to he's in journalism. Can you believe somebody's choosing that these days?
Yeah, I can. Journalism is not a bad field to be in. Newspapers it's a little bit shaky these days, but I think the future of journalism itself is relatively bright. There's lots of opportunities for people who want to report the news and analyze the news. It just may not be on ink and paper so much. So
we are, in fact, the publication that I write for is struggling with that. We're going really doing a lot of stuff electronic now.
Yeah, I mean that's the direction it's going, and I used to be much more, really bullish when people would ask me, should I just let my kid go into journalism? And I'm a little less so now, but I do think that for talented people who are interested in, like I said, in the act of gathering news and presenting news and stuff that the market for information is growing and the audience for information is growing. We have more readers now than we've ever had by quite a bit. We just don't have as many subscribers as we had before, which is it's sort of the conundrum of the digital age. And I think we're dealing with it in a bunch of different ways. And good luck to Lauren. I mean, I think that if he wants to make a career in journalism and he wants to work at it, there's going to be jobs out there. So it's not that bad.
Say thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, Lauren. No.
There you go.
Thank you.
Well, when I first contacted you, we only have about 2.5 minutes in this segment, but I just want to kind of set this up. And when I originally contacted Eric, I told him that I had read his column on and off for years and had rarely agreed with him. But you wrote a column. It was a few weeks ago. It was on, what was it? I think January 23rd. And the title of it was Appreciating the Need for Gun Respect. And I have to say that I thought, again, I don't necessarily agree with everything you say, but it was a very nicely written piece. It was like trying to reach across the aisle, and that's why I invited you to come on tonight.
Well, I appreciate that. I have, been over the years someone who is not hostile to gun rights by any means. I mean, I feel that, independent of the Second Amendment, I think that it's a good idea that law-abiding, well-trained people can have guns if they want them to protect themselves and their property. I think that it has been remiss of Illinois not to be a concealed carry state. It's working pretty well in the other 49 states where it is in work. And so, I'm not someone who is necessarily hostile to gun rights. So, in that sense, I feel like, I part from my liberal brethren in that area. But, I'm sure we're going to find a great deal to agree with, especially judging from your opening rant.
I actually wrote that rant thinking of you, Eric.
I'm honored.
So I want to, before we go out to commercial break, the one thing I do want to do is we throw terms around, and I don't want them to get in the way. So those of us who are the big Second Amendment guys, we always talk about anti-Second Amendment people, but you're really not an anti-Second Amendment person. We just have different opinions. What term can I use that, for me and you?
For me, you mean?
Well, I'm just thinking if I say, you anti-gun guys, but you're not necessarily anti-gun.
I think, I have no problem. Like I said, I have no problem with law-abiding people owning firearms. I'm not particularly concerned about cosmetic issues having to do with, what they call assault weapons. I think that's a really distracting issue. Do I think that people need to have, 100-round clips or whatever, or bayonet mounts or grenade launchers, whatever the hell they have on the things? Not particularly, but it's not something that I think is going to make much of a difference in terms of what the real problem with guns is in our society, which is that there are too many bad people who have too easy access to guns.
Well,
I hope that you and your listeners and I can agree on. I mean, if we can find points that
we got to take a break, Eric. We're going to be right back.
You can find this podcast and others at Gun Rights Radio Network, gunrightsradio.com. Podcasting freedom.
Hi, I'm David Lombardo, host of On Target Radio. You're living proof that radio advertising reaches listeners. In the 2 years I've been advertising on AM 560 WIND, Safer USA grew from 300 students a year to over 1,200. By coupling our On Target Radio broadcast with our Facebook page, we found our audience is steadily growing, and in only 2 months it appears we've exceeded 5,000 listeners. Over 34% are in the age group 25 to 34, 26% are 35 to 44. We have listeners from Rockford to Western Michigan and Southern Wisconsin to St. Louis. Thanks to live streaming on the internet, we also have listeners as far away as Germany, Japan, and New Zealand. On Target Radio is offering low-cost sponsorship opportunities on Chicago's premier conservative talk radio station. Advertising on AM 560 WIND has worked for Safer USA. Let me show you how it can work for you. Call 815-744-5487. Join the On Target Radio team today at 815-744-5487.
You're listening to On Target Radio on AM 560, The Answer, with David Lombardo. Here's David with more interesting conversation on firearms, safety, your Second Amendment rights, and much more.
And this is Fighting Back, brought to you by the Illinois State Rifle Association. Headline, Senior Citizen Sharpshooter. Vegas burglar killed by elderly gun owner. A 72-year-old man who was the victim of a recent burglary immediately went for his handgun when he heard a commotion in his Las Vegas home early Monday morning. Several armed intruders had gotten into the home, entered the bedroom, and the victim, in fighting back, fired at least one shot, and they all fled, the police said. When the police did arrive at Dr. Joseph Parassi's residence, they found one of the intruders was attempted to flee in a car. The suspect hit a patrol car and then attempted to escape on foot before police took him down. A second suspect was last seen on foot running into a residential neighborhood. Officers found a third male dead from an apparent gunshot wound in Dr. Parassi's backyard, where a handgun was also found. The incident was the second time in 3 days that a resident in the Las Vegas Valley had grabbed a gun during an attempted burglary and fired at an intruder. Metro Police said neither homeowner will face charges. This has been Fighting Back, brought to you by the Illinois State Rifle Association.
Always pithy, Tim, always pithy. You're listening to On Target Radio, AM 560, The Answer, and our guest this evening is Eric Zorn. Eric, we are back. We are alive. Tell us a little bit about what your perspective is then, with particularly the city of Chicago, but Illinois in general.
Well, I assume you mean having to do with guns and gun rights, right?
Exactly.
Well, first of all, I think that the city's handgun ban was ineffective and I think unconstitutional, and I'm not unhappy to see it overturned. I would, however, like to see some way of keeping the flow of, I guess I'm going to go back to this point again, which is to see if we can keep the guns out of the hands of people who are not qualified and should not have them.
Tell me how to do that.
The problem. Well, first of all, I do want to say that the idea that gun bans are ineffective because they don't work, because Chicago has such a high rate of gun violence and there has been a long-standing gun ban in Chicago, doesn't really make any sense to me, because, as you well know, Chicago is ringed with gun shops and guns flow in here. So it's like saying that we should never put up any chain link fences because they don't keep out water, and that's exactly what happens in Chicago. The guns flow in here very, very easily. In terms of blocking straw purchases, I think they need to crack down really hard on straw purchasing firearms, and I think the only way to do that is with a system of registration. and making sure that people who buy the guns and own the guns are the ones who have the guns, and they don't buy them and then hand them off to people who use them for bad purposes. And that when people are caught using guns, particularly guns they're not qualified to own or they didn't legitimately buy for bad purposes, they should be punished extremely severely. That you really have to increase the cost of straw purchasing greatly.
Let me interject something, and I don't necessarily disagree with that, but here's a thought. Under the Clinton administration, for instance, there were almost no federal prosecutions for that. These things historically have not been done. You catch someone and they basically don't prosecute them. We're not enforcing the laws that exist.
Well, that's true. I think that we are not enforcing the way we should, and we should. I mean, I think that's certainly one way to go about that. I would certainly go along with any call to enforce laws against guns. I'm not really happy with the way that that Congress has refused to authorize tracking gun crimes. The way Congress has refused to appoint a head of the ATF. There doesn't seem to be the interest in enforcing and tracking gun crimes on the part of gun rights advocates that I would like to see. I mean, what I'm saying is I don't feel like there is truly common cause from the gun rights community and the people in the anti-violence community, and yet I think there is opportunity for that to exist. That there could be and should be more opportunities for people who are law-abiding, people who want to see violence diminished, who are appalled by the amount of people who are shot and killed, to get together and see if they can find solutions that can work for everybody without the level of suspicion and fear on both sides that seems to currently exist.
Well, and okay, so now you open up the next question, and here's the thing: why? This is a rhetorical question, but why is it that those of us who are very pro-gun have that distrust? And let me give you one good example of why that is. Why we are very concerned about the concept of registering guns, and why we're very concerned about this. Take the assault weapon. First of all, that's a made-up term. It's not a military term, and you alluded to it. It's a cosmetic thing. So here's the issue. They're going out to ban what they call assault weapons. And half of the people who are talking about it, like Feinstein, can't even identify what it is. And here's the problem. In the city of Chicago in 2012, one person was killed with a long gun. One. And they keep pounding in that this is the gun of choice, this is a mass execution thing, blah, blah, blah. And the fact is, in the city of Chicago, one person. If you're going to go after guns that actually cause the problem, then you got to go after handguns.
Right. No, I agree with that. And in fact, a lot of this talk we've had about, the Newtown school tragedy, which was, I think we can all agree was a horrible thing.
Of course.
But I think that most of the things that are being talked about in terms of changes in the law are not things that would have necessarily stopped this Newton. I mean, you're going to find that no matter you would have to pass an incredible number of laws. I don't even think you could ever really stop something like that from happening if you have someone with the mental issues that the killer had in that case. I mean, you're just not going to stop us. I mean, I think the bigger problem is that we have too many shootings, like the Hadia Pendleton shooting in Chicago, which almost certainly, now we don't know for sure. I guess the police are questioning people of interest even as we speak tonight. But I'll bet you that the gun, if it is ever recovered that was used in that crime, was not a gun that was legally purchased,
sure,
and legally owned. I mean, I'm sure. I take that back. I'm sure it was legally purchased at some point, but that the owner itself did not legally possess that gun.
Right.
Not to mention, obviously using it illegally, but just having it, and that's really the problem. I mean, you're right. The number of guns that were seized in Chicago last year, I think there were, I want to say, and I didn't look this up. I should. You probably know this more than I do. It was like 7,000 guns were seized last year in Chicago, and some very small percentage of them were these, so-called assault weapons or long guns. They're nearly all handguns, and that's, that seems to be the problem. And the problem is handguns in the hands of bad people. And I think if we start from that point of agreement, then we can start talking about, okay, what are possible ways that we can not unduly infringe upon the rights of people like yourself who want to have firearms and who want to collect firearms, who want to hunt and so on. How can we construct laws that will guarantee the rights of those people, that will not frighten those people, that will leave them secure in their rights, and at the same time really cut down on the number of guns in the hands of the people who shouldn't have them. I mean, that's the question that we're dealing with, and it's very hard to have that conversation when people are terrified of the idea of even creating a registry of gun owners.
And they are. I mean,
I know they are. I hear from them all the time. It's like
sure.
this. As soon as we have to do background checks on. I mean, Wayne LaPierre said this on TV a week ago. He said basically if we have mandatory background checks, and that leads to registration, and registration leads to confiscation, which, it's like, and then President Obama sends in the black helicopters, rounds up the conservatives, and puts them into re-education camps. I mean, this seems to be the kind of mindset among people, and they're so scared of that they're not willing to take the kind of steps that might actually cut down on this carnage.
There's one other thing that impinges upon this, and it is every time historically that people have taken away some portion of gun ownership, whatever it was, magazines, I don't care, they always have said, this is what we need to do to solve the problem. We don't want to take your guns away. This is all we need to do to solve your problem. And as soon as they get it, then they start on the next one. So what you have is a situation where you have a giant body. There are about 80 million gun owners in the United States, and there's a body of people who now say, well, you can't trust them. If you give an inch, they take a mile. So what's happened is people have become entrenched, and they're going, we're not giving up anything. We're going to make them fight for every inch. And you only have 15 seconds, Eric.
Well, there are parallels to that in the abortion debate. We can get to that in the next segment if you'd like.
You're right, and we definitely should do that. But that's it, because the things that you say, other than maybe the registration issue, but the things that you say, I don't know of any gun owners that I know that don't agree with that. It's just that we've become extremely distrustful of the fact that people will lie, like about assault weapons, instead of just coming out and saying, look, here's the problem, how are we going to solve it? We can talk more about that when we come back. We got a few messages we have to get out to you, and you're listening to On Target Radio on AM 560, The Answer.
Attention firearm owners or those considering exercising your Second Amendment rights. I want to tell you about Illinois Gun Works. From void services and new firearm purchases to gunsmith services and an indoor shooting range, Don and his staff will assist you without attitude or pressure. Need training? Illinois Gun Works' popular Illinois Responsible Firearm Owners class teaches you the regulations to legally defend yourself, own, and transport your firearm. There's a required class for a Chicago firearm permit and popular new shooter familiarization class, including one for women. Now, I took this class and urge you to reserve your spot fast for this fun class. Illinois Gun Works offers a wide selection of training and certification classes, from security work to those just considering ownership, even special group classes. Illinois Gun Works, Chicagoland's full-service firearm headquarters, is located on Grand Avenue, just a block west of Harlem in Elmwood Park. Call 708-452-0040 or visit IllinoisGunWorks.com. That's 708-452-0040. Hi,
I'm David Lombardo, host of On Target Radio. You're living proof that radio advertising reaches listeners. In the 2 years I've been advertising on AM 560 WIND, Safer USA grew from 300 students a year to over 1,200. By coupling our On Target Radio broadcast with our Facebook page, we found our audience is steadily growing, and in only 2 months it appears we've exceeded 5,000 listeners. Over 34% are in the age group 25 to 34, 26% are 35 to 44. We have listeners from Rockford to Western Michigan and Southern Wisconsin to St. Louis. Thanks to live streaming on the internet, we also have listeners as far away as Germany, Japan, and New Zealand. On Target Radio is offering low-cost sponsorship opportunities on Chicago's premier conservative talk radio station. Advertising on AM 560 WIND has worked for Safer USA. Let me show you how it can work for you. Call 815-744-5487. Join the On Target Radio team today at 815-744-5487.
You're listening to On Target Radio on AM 560, The Answer, with David Lombardo. Here's David with more interesting conversation on firearms, safety, your Second Amendment rights, and much more.
All right, welcome back to On Target Radio. And for over 100 years, the Illinois State Rifle Association has supported the rights and freedoms of Illinois citizens to keep and bear arms. For over 100 years, the ISRA has supported the use of firearms as sport for personal protection and as fundamental aspect of national defense. For over 100 years, the Illinois State Rifle Association has been supporting you. Don't you think it's time you supported them? ISRA.org or 815-635-3198. That's 815-635-3198. The Illinois State Rifle Association, supporting you.
You're hired.
That's it. You're in
hired.
journalism. You're in. Eric, don't you think he should be in?
Did he just read that?
That was him.
Well, then the radio is for him, yeah.
That's it. And Eric, you're not in the studio. He has a face for radio.
That's an unkind thing to say.
No, he's a nice guy. He's a real nice guy. That scares me is it turns out you're a nice guy.
Yeah, isn't that terrible?
And you went to the University of Michigan. I'm an Illini.
I did. Well, congratulations to the Illini today for upsetting Minnesota.
Yeah.
That was quite a game.
It's an exciting day. So, here's kind of a thought of all this that we're talking about. Just to tag back on what we were talking about before we took a break, there's just this distrust that has been built up, and I think if people had honest discussions, if they just said, this is the problem, how are we going to deal with it? But it's always this rhetoric like assault weapons, when anybody who looks at even the Department of Justice statistics knows that those rifles have, somebody I think computed it, they are in something like 0.2% of the crimes committed. What's the point?
Well, I agree with that. I think it is a huge distraction from what the real issue is here, and it does serve clearly to inflame people who are on your side of this debate and harden their position. And you're absolutely right when you point out the fact that there are certain people who are opposed to gun rights, who are opposed to all guns altogether. And first of all, I'm not a gun owner. And I have fired guns before. I mean, I know what they can do. I just don't choose to have one in my home for various reasons. But I understand why people want them, and I think like if you look at what the problem is in this society for gun violence, it's not legal trained firearm owners.
Well, you know what, Don?
But I will concede. I will concede that there are people who feel quite differently than I do. I think like the answer to our problems is to get rid of private ownership of guns. Who feel like that would be a real problem. That if we could go and become a country like some of these European countries where the violence rate is much lower and the rate of private firearm ownership is much lower, then we could. I don't even think that debate is worth engaging in, because it's just not going to happen. Here we have, you say 80 million families have guns. I think there are 300 million guns out there or something like that. Those are the numbers that get tossed around. It's just not going to happen. We live in a different culture. Our history is different. Our Constitution is different. Our culture is, everything about our nation is different. We have the playing field that we have, and it just does seem to me that people of goodwill who aren't wildly distrustful of the other side could get together and come up with some sort of ways that we could, as again I keep going back to this, can we get the guns out of the hands of people who are very highly likely to misuse them?
Now, let me ask you a question. Mark on Facebook said, why does the media continue to distort the truth and not report where guns save lives and or prevent criminal activity? There's always stories. In the past week, numerous stories in the Trib, and they never report the stories where people use a firearm and actually save somebody's life.
Never is not true, because that we have had stories about I personally did a story about a widow who fired, and I think she killed or ran off a young man who broke into her home on the south side. We did a piece not too long ago about a guy who was a bar owner or something like that. I mean, we do the stories. I don't know that we cover them, every one that happens, and I.
But we cover every bad story that happens.
The other thing is, I don't know to the extent to which those come to our attention. That it's not, I don't know that these. Like I say, I'm not on the police beat. I don't know what our police reporter hears, but I'm guessing that these kind of stories just don't actually ever come to our attention. I did a story, this goes back 20 years or so, where I talked about this phenomenon. It was in the context of concealed carry, and I said that I think it was, was it maybe Gary Kleck? Is that name right?
Yeah, sure, University of Florida.
I'm just pulling this out of my memory bank here. But did a story about the number of uses, the defensive uses of firearms around the country, and he thought this was really underreported. and that I think, again, I'm just going by memory, that this was a regular feature in an NRA publication, maybe.
That's right.
And so I asked people locally to tell me their stories, and I publicized those, and people would write and talk about. And a lot of the stories were things like, I was on an L platform, and a couple of guys, kind of came up to me, looked like they were trouble, and I pulled my waistband back and let them know that I was armed, and they slowly walked away. Now, that story's not going to make the newspapers unless somebody tells it, because it's not going to be a police report, right?
Sure.
The guy's not going to call the cops and say, I was carrying a gun illegally in Chicago, and this is what happened. So
You're not going to hear that.
I think some of these things actually aren't reported. Yeah. I mean, they may get written up in the publications, but they're not reported.
Okay, we're going to have to break again, but when we come back, Don Moran, president of the ISRA, mentions 80% of the people who committed murders in Chicago are former criminals. And let's chat about that when we come back after these messages with more On Target Radio.
For 35 years, Pelcher's Shooter's Supply has served the Lansing area. Pelcher's offers new and used firearms sales, appraisals, and gunsmithing service. Pelcher's new spacious showroom has hundreds of major brand firearms and supplies, and PelcherGuns.com features daily specials. Pelcher's Shooter's Supply, on the corner of Ridge Road and Henry Street in downtown Lansing. Online at PelcherGuns.com or call 708-474-0662.
You can hear Gun Rights Radio Network on Stitcher Smart Radio. Stitcher allows you to listen to your favorite shows directly from your iPhone, Android phone, BlackBerry, or Palm phones, on demand and on the go. Don't have Stitcher? Download it for free today at Stitcher.com or in the app stores. Stitcher Smart Radio, the smarter way to listen to radio. Gun Rights Radio Network shows can be found under sources.
You're listening to On Target Radio on AM 560, The Answer, with David Lombardo. Here's David with more interesting conversation on firearms, safety, your Second Amendment rights, and much more.
And we're back with more On Target Radio. You're listening to AM 560, The Answer. This evening, we are talking about the case for gun control, and we're talking with Eric Zorn, Chicago Tribune columnist. Eric, you haven't quit on us yet, have you?
I'm still here.
You know, when you originally said you wanted to do this by phone, my first thought is, do you have more than 2 ears?
No, Sunday nights are kind of nutty around our house, so
That's fine. Don Moran, president of the Illinois State Rifle Association, brought up an interesting point with the assault weapon ban thing going through the Congress now and all of that. I'm sure Democrats in particular remember 1994. What do we even think the chances are this is going to get any traction at all?
I don't think there's much chance that assault weapons ban is going to pass this time. I think I think that they're going to look to do the background checks, mandatory background checks on every gun sale, and
I think you're right.
Call it a day. I don't see the political will there to do the assault weapons ban. I mean, it could happen in Springfield given the balance of the legislature, but even downstate Democrats
they're not for it.
Are not really all that excited about an assault weapons ban. And the thing is, the truth is that it's just one of those things that it doesn't seem like it's worth it. It's not going to be worth the political cost. The payoff, as you pointed out, the statistical payoff is just not going to be there. So 10 years from now, they're going to look back and go, did this do anything? The answer is no. And in all likelihood, no. So
the interesting thing is, last week we had on our show the Reverend Dr. Eric Wallace. Very nice gentleman, and he's running for Jesse Jackson's old seat. And
the Tribune endorsed him today, by the way.
Who did?
The Tribune did.
Oh, did they really?
In the, I think that's right. Yes, Wallace. That's right.
I'm glad to hear that.
Republican primary.
He is just the nicest man. It was so nice to have him on. But he takes a very realistic attitude about this because, as Don Moran pointed out with the ISRA, he goes 80% of the people who committed gun crimes last year were recidivists, and we're not dealing with the fact, and purely putting people in jail isn't the answer either. I mean, I think the root cause is what we have to get to.
Well, now you've really set the table for a difficult.
And you only have 3 minutes, so you got to solve it.
You're right. I mean, I think when you're talking about the problem is you're talking about bad people wanting guns, and then you're talking about these people don't have jobs. The education they're getting is not good, and the family structure has disintegrated. All these things are connected, and so I mean, that is a huge problem. The problem of some lone killer like this guy in California right now, who everyone's hiding from, the rogue cop.
Right.
I mean, just as an aside, I got to say, if I were out there in the hills outside Los Angeles, I wouldn't mind having a gun in my house if that guy were out prowling through the woods. But anyway.
did you read what they said in California? Feinstein or whoever it was is saying, we want everybody to put their guns away. Even you laugh. Look, see?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's, but I guess what I'm saying is that I take the point. The problems here are very deep. When you're dealing just with the firearms issue, it does seem to me that if you could get people together and say, look, if we have the background checks on every transfer, if we keep track of our weapons, if we keep track of who's got the guns, which is what Tony Preckwinkle is trying to do in Cook County. Let's keep track of who has them. If they lose them, they've got to report it. We need to find out. We need to know where these guns are, who's got them. And the fact is that that's not going to lead to confiscation. We're never, as long as we have the Second Amendment, we will never have gun confiscation. And there's no chance that we're going to overturn the Second Amendment. None. I mean, it's not even close. You wouldn't get 40% of the people who want to overturn the Second Amendment right now in this country. Politically, it's not going to happen.
But you don't think that what happened in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina could possibly happen in Chicago if there was some type of registration and some terrible event happened?
You think the police had nothing better to do than go house to house during Hurricane Katrina?
That's what they did.
What they did, and they confiscated firearms.
Well, if they were, I mean, no, I don't think that would happen, and I don't think that as a practical matter that would be any kind of no, I don't think that that's a legitimate fear. I just don't. It's like if we're going to base our firearms policy on this worst possible case, this worst possible scenario, the most paranoid thing you can think of, that the worst possible leader of the country could do, then we're never going to move on any of these things, right? I mean, you're saying that people on your side are afraid that the Dianne Feinsteins of the world are going to come around to your house and take all your guns, and the people who are on the gun control side are afraid that all you guys are going to buy 50, 60 handguns and give them out to every punk on the street who gives you $20 for it. And so you're just never going to get anywhere. And I think the whole point is that if we can find some incremental steps, plus this idea of cracking down on straw purchases, cracking down on the people who violate the laws we already have, that maybe we can make a dent in these statistics, because we're not doing it now.
One of the things that people will tell you is, agree or not, tell me, and you got 30 seconds to do it. But one of the things that people will tell you is that this administration has literally split the country in half. You literally have people, and I'm not in the camp, but you literally have people who are saying they will take up arms. And that's never, even under Bill Clinton, that didn't happen.
Yeah, you have people say that. I mean, I still think that's I hope and think that that's a very fringe.
Well, I think
minority.
it is.
And people who don't have any idea what they would go up against if they were to actually take up arms against the government. I mean, let's face it. It would be like, somebody put it, it would be like shooting BBs at a bear. All you do is get the bear mad and go after you.
Eric, we need to chat more about that. We only have 19 seconds, but you might be shocked at the truth of that subject. But we gotta take a break, and we'll be right back. You're listening to On Target Radio, AM 560, The Answer, and we'll be back with wrap up the show with Eric Zorn. I'm David Lombardo, president of Safer USA, Chicagoland's most popular firearm training school. We continue to offer our popular home protection and concealed carry seminar every month. This 8-hour seminar covers everything you need to know to safely and legally use a firearm for both concealed carry and home invasion, and qualifies you for Florida and Utah concealed carry permits good in about 30 states. Be sure to call and ask how we can help you raise funds for your organization or provide a guest speaker. We're also offering the NRA Basic Pistol Course and our Tactical Pistol 1 and 2. As always, I offer private one-on-one instruction for Basic Pistol, Chicago Firearm Certification, and Basic Home Defense. For further information, please call 877-954-3030 or go to saferusa.com. Safer USA, choosing to own a firearm is your business. Teaching you to own it responsibly is ours.
That's 877-954-3030 or saferusa.com.
You're listening to On Target Radio on AM 560, The Answer, with David Lombardo. Here's David with more interesting conversation on firearms, safety, your Second Amendment rights, and much more.
So, Eric, we have to wrap it up. This is the big show finale, but I would like you, if you would, to consider the possibility of sort of getting your Sunday night in order, because I think what would be a very interesting show is to have you in the studio along with Don Moran, who's the president of the ISRA, who shares a lot of your thoughts in terms of the social issues, and Dr. Wallace, who also does. And I mean, we have different points of view, but I think it'd be a great show.
Sounds interesting, yeah. See if I can get it done. I mean, I do think, though, that conversations like the one we're having here do sort of point the way toward the fault lines in this debate in terms of where the chasm actually is, and where it might be bridgeable. And I do think that, for instance, the background checks was something that Wayne LaPierre was all in favor of in 1999, and suddenly he's no longer in favor of them. Those are the kind of things that I think can start making the American people feel like this gun problem can be brought under some sort of control, which is what they want. And gun control does not mean confiscation. And this is something that both sides are going to have to acknowledge, and both sides are going to have to get their minds around and really mean it. The president, I think you'll have to agree that the president has said a lot of the right things. He has said he's in favor of the Second Amendment. He believes in the rights of hunters. He believes in the rights of citizens. The fact is that you guys don't believe him. And that's,
Well, you're right.
And there's a lot of mistrust there.
You are right. But I think in our defense, we don't believe him because we have a different take on the Second Amendment. Our belief of the Second Amendment simply is that it is the line that guarantees that all the rest of the amendments are going to exist.
Were you guys? I know neither of us were around then, but like when they banned the ownership, basically banned the ownership of machine guns.
Right.
I mean, that was an infringement on the right to bear arms, I guess, but it doesn't seem like it was an appalling
you're right.
breach of that. And so, I mean, do seem like there are things that we can say, well, okay, the fundamental right to bear arms was not abridged by the banning on machine guns. The fact that you can't own a bazooka or a rocket launcher, which is an arm, a form of an arm, doesn't mean that your right to bear arms has been infringed in any meaningful way. Just like my right to free speech is not infringed by the fact that I can't say certain things in certain situations or about certain people. I think there are ways that we can at least edge towards some sort of thing. And I got to say that the stereotype of people on your side is that you're much more interested in owning your own guns than whether kids live or die in the inner city. That you don't really care about all this carnage out there as long as you have your guns and no one ever comes and takes your ATV out of your garage. That's what you're concerned about. You're not concerned about all the I'm not saying it's fair.
It's not that we don't care about that. We do. But the point is we're perhaps a little paranoid about it's a slippery slope. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Quickly tell us when your column runs.
It runs on Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays in the Tribune, and I'm online at chicagotribune.com/Zorn 5 days a week or more. And I love to hear from people, and we talk about these issues and debate them in the comment threads and so on in my blog and on Facebook and places like that. So I'm always interested in hearing what people have to say, and I've talked about this issue before. I'm sure I'll be talking about it again. So
I appreciate very much your coming on. I really do, and I hope we will have you on again.
It's good to talk to you. Thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
This is Tim. I would like to remind everybody that's in Will County that tomorrow morning at 8:30 at the office building in downtown Joliet, that there's going to be a hearing on concealed carry, 8:30 a.m. tomorrow morning, Will County office building.
I'll be there tomorrow morning. We'd like to thank our guest, Eric Zorn. We'd like to thank Robin Zeeland, our call screener. George is on the board. We'd like to thank Lauren Fuller for coming in and visiting with us, and we hope you will come back. Thanks to Illinois Gunworks, Pelcher Shooter Supply, Illinois State Rifle Association, 31 Moons, and Safer USA, our sponsors. Next week is a U of I basketball game. We will return February 17th. Until then, friend On Target Radio on Facebook, and thanks for listening. Say goodnight, Tim.
Good night.
Good night, all. Come back in 2 weeks for more On Target Radio.